Thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Stéphane Strianin from EDF. I am a representative of BDF at the Gaia-X Association. We have two people here, Martin Gourier, who is the business leader of the initiatives with us. And I am representing EDF at the more technical working groups, the technical committee, and also another technical working group. So the purpose here is it's part of the data space initiative monitoring of Gaia-X. Gaia-X is an initiative. And I was wondering, because I don't know if any of you know anything about Gaia-X, so I wondered, should I summarize Gaia-X? How do I summarize Gaia-X? And I realized that it's impossible to summarize Gaia-X because there are public deliverables which are fairly complex, and trying to summarize in one slide or two the actual contents would be of great disservice because it's a rather convoluted construct. So I chose to take the perspective of a project, which I hope is in a way your perspective, because Omega-X is building data spaces. I chose to take the perspective of a project who wants to build data spaces, an ecosystem or ecosystems exchanging data. And as part of the proposal phase, Omega-X was saying that it was going to be Gaia-X compliant. So I took the perspective of what a project needs to know and what a project needs to do as it wants to be Gaia-X compliant. So what is Gaia-X, and what should I know about Gaia-X when building the project? I hope it will fit the kind of questions you may be asking yourselves. Otherwise, we'll be having questions afterwards. So this is in a nutshell what I believe a project needs to know. So I'm going to go from the bottom to the top, from the very foundation to the higher value that is brought. And for each of those, there are two conceptual angles. One which is it's quite specific to Gaia-X, so you need to, in a way, wrap your mind around this concept. There is a interoperability of trust, and there is interoperability of data sharing. And interoperability of trust is really mainly about identity, testimonies of trust, who each participant is as a company, who are other participants, and why should they trust each other? Who's testifying that another party is trustworthy? What labels does that other party has accomplished and been awarded by which certifying organization? That's the core of the interoperability of trust. And then once trust is established, you have the data sharing, which needs its own interoperability, and that's on the top. So for each of them, which activities on Gaia-X is doing, what's the current status as of October? What your project will likely need to do in the midterm, so that would impact technical design, and also a short term to do like a kickstart of what you would maybe first be doing in order to jump on board the train, so to speak. So bottom up. In the interoperability of trust, you have the trust framework and the architecture document, which are core deliverables, and they describe the whole architecture of Gaia-X. They describe how trust is working, and that takes the form of JSON documents with fields, some monetary fields, some not so monetary, which, and in a way, the core of a trust framework is a self-description through which each service, it can be a cloud provider service, but it can be also a data sharing service. And that's where it has a link to data space. So each service needs to publish a self-description which describes the service, what it is, who is publishing it, and a number of fields. So this is described in those two documents. And there was a release in April 2204, which was published, and the next release, October release, is imminent. It's coming in the next days. So a project in the midterm needs to comply with and implement the trust framework, which was formerly known as Gaia-X compliant. People were asking, okay, what do we need to do? What do we want to be Gaia-X compliant? We are Gaia-X compliant, but oh, by the way, what does it mean Gaia-X compliant? This is it. This is about implementing the trust framework. So first steps would be to read the documents, those two documents, and pay special attention to the step description, which again is how a service, cloud service or data sharing service is going to present itself to the world and to its ecosystem. And it has a life cycle because a service can come to market. It can be discontinued. It can have credentials by a third party because it's been certified with a label, and the label can be revoked because trust is not there anymore, or the certification has not been renewed, which is a bit similar. So there is a life cycle. There are some services. So this is something these are pointers. It's impossible to summarize all those documents. So these are pointers, and all the documents are in, all publications are in Gaia-X.eu Mediatek publications. And I would really recommend that the technical designers, technical architects, project managers in Omega-X would join the working group that I'm co-leading, the technical working group of the Data Spaces Business Committee, as a first point of contact, because that's where the data sharing projects are first joining to share questions, share their requirements, because sometimes they have requirements to Gaia-X, and share the experience. Okay, that's the foundation. Then you have the policy rules and labeling framework, which currently has only been published for cloud service providers. I know there is some thinking going on. It's a work in progress for data spaces because the questions are a bit similar in a way. But then, the labeling framework, in a nutshell, has a purpose of summarizing in a very broad way how much you would want to trust a service. And it's really, it's been published for the cloud service providers. So you can check the document again and the policy rules and the labeling framework. And you will see that there is a label, level 1, level 2, level 3 as the core Gaia-X label. And there could be more labels, like industry-specific labels, of course. The framework supports that and encourages that. But it's essentially about saying that there is a level 1, level 2, level 3, which is as much complexity as any high-level decision maker would encompass or be willing to discuss. Like, let's not dive into the detail. Okay, are you level 1, level 2, level 3? And the labeling criteria in more detail are detailing what those level 1, level 2, level 3 mean. Like, for example, with cloud service providers, you have level 3 means that a cloud service needs to be immune to non-EU jurisdictions. That's for cloud service provider. But you could also wonder, well, what about a data sharing service? Is Omega-X is going to share data? It's going to go through APIs. It's going to be data sharing services. So does a data sharing service also have these kind of questions? Is it relevant or not at the data sharing service should be or not should be immune to non-EU jurisdictions. So that's what a labeling framework is aiming at summarizing in a broad way, because sometimes the simplest answers need a simple answer. Level 3, yes or no. Level 2, yes or no. So an industry sector could also define its own label. Are you energy sector data sharing compliant level 1 or level 2 or level 3? And that would be up to the energy sector to define what those labels level means, and the Gaia-X infrastructure through the self-descriptions and through the labeling frameworks and the trust framework enable the automation of all this, but not the actual definition of what it is for you to be trustworthy. So that's currently for cloud service providers only. That has much potential for data sharing ecosystems, but not yet done today. So I would recommend that you stay alert for future evolutions, and if there is any update on that, which I am not aware of, I would update this slide and maybe come back to you in a few months with an update if you're not aware of already. Okay, so next you have Gaia-X compliance service and register service. So we're getting here into the core of implementation, not just a paper, but actual services. And these services are, I think they're open source. Yeah, last time I checked, they're communities which the code has been seeded by the Gaia-X association and moves onto community work now. And they're still under prototyping in a way. And these compliance service and register service, which are part of more broadly other Gaia-X Federation services, their purpose is to manage the self-descriptions. The one that I mentioned earlier on, the self-description is the identity card of your service. It can be a cloud provider service, it can be a data sharing service. As a data ecosystem which is aiming to be Gaia-X compliant, the data sharing services within OmegaX will need to publish a self-description. So how do they do that? They're going to need to check that they're going to need to write their self-description, which again is something like a JSON document, and they're going to need to check that the self-description are compliant. How do I check that the Gaia-X is compliant? I use the compliance service, which currently is hosted by the Gaia-X Association, although that's not a long-term target; it's a temporary one. So you need to check that your self-description is valid. Is validly signed, because there is some cryptographic signature in that. You write your JSON document and you have it signed. You check that it is correctly signed through the compliance service, and then you're going to publish it. And there are multiple avenues in the future for doing that. You can publish the JSON on your website through a URL. That's the current way and workaround, but it's going to be also published, I understand, through a broader Gaia-X registry, distributed registry. So when that's clearer, you're going to need to, in the midterm, you're going to need to publish. So here I'm reading, after I've done the explanation, I'm reading here. You're going to need to publish a Gaia-X compliance subscription, either through implementation or usage of these services, and maybe also broader implementation of the Gaia-X Federation services, and more on this in the next slide, which is going to be much shorter. And what you need to do in the short term, and the tentative short term to-do list, you really need to include the trust framework in your technical design, in the thinking of the project technical design, because as I said, being Gaia-X compliant is not just saying, oh, we have authentication and we have data. Gaia-X has authentication and Gaia-X data. Oh, so we are Gaia-X compliant. No, that's not so simple. You're going really to need to include the trust framework into your technical design thinking and include in technical design. And I would really highly, warmly recommend that you join the hackathons. Last one was in September. Next date is still to be defined, but they're immensely helpful because people in there get further acquainted with the scope of the framework and the technology and using the services and testing the services. And you have online meetings where you can share your experience and questions and benefit from other project experience. So it's immensely useful. And you can also join the Gaia-X description working group if you want to have more, say, smaller group discussion on all this self-description stuff. So that's about the trust. And the last, moving up in the value chain, the interoperability of data sharing, which is in full transparency a bit more recent because the work had started in Gaia-X in May of this year when the exchange working group was formed. And the deliverables by Gaia-X on this are again, the architecture documents, which I talked about already, and the Gaia-X specifications for data exchange. And that's a produce of the data exchange working group, which I mentioned. And the broad narrative about this is that, and that's the narrative of the working group, if you implement the Gaia-X specification for data exchange, you're going to have interoperable data exchange. There is a 22.10 release. It's imminent in the next days. That's going to be the first release for the data exchange specifications. I realized the ambition is great. It's a big ambition, but that's a purposive and an overall narrative. And what the projects are going to need to do within that scope is to implement or deploy software or procure services that are compliant with the specifications. And the association is going, as far as I understand today, the association is going to release specifications, not software. And the objective is to reach interoperability of the data sharing through compliance to common specifications. And that is essentially all I could do because I haven't personally read the specifications. They're going to go public soon, and that will be the right time to get in detail acquainted with them. So the short-term to-do will be to read the documents when they come out and join the Gaia-X data exchange working group, which is highly recommended because I guess that, like many other people, you're going to have obviously questions about the specifications and how you could use them and what's coming up next and all sorts of things. So the exchange working group is the place to discuss that. There's no way you will be able to understand, implement, comply with by proxy. There is no proxying in that stuff. It can only take reality through technical design of Omega-X and having technical designers hands-on, first-hand with this stuff. Okay, that was long because it was the core. 2 more slides, which are going to be much quicker. The federation services of Gaia-X, which I mentioned, which are broader than just the compliance service and the register service. They have reached, and that's a big milestone as of this month, they have reached the stage of being QA ready, available for testing, as I understand it. And a whole lot of them: authentication, managing credentials, some more trust services. As far as data sharing is concerned, there are only 2 services which are not implementing the actual exchange of data. They are implementing the signaling. In a way, if you're familiar with telecom protocols, in a way, there's signaling and there's data exchange. This is about signaling. It's about the data contract service, data exchange logging. Data contract is about agreeing that we're going to exchange data based on commonly agreed rules, terms. And data exchange logging is about logging in a non-refutable way that we agreed to exchange data, and we have actually exchanged data. But this does not include the actual exchange of data. So this is food for thought for you. And then more services on the right which are coming up. So that's the for the Gaia-X Federation services, gxfs.eu. And then last slide, which is not Gaia-X but related in a way. Gaia-X is part of the broader initiative which you're probably monitoring in a separate sub-work packet or separate stream, I guess. And that's the Spaces Business Alliance, which includes BDVA, as you probably know, FIWARE, Gaia-X, and the IDSA. And they recently published a document called Technical Convergent Discussion Document, which is fairly massive. It's more than 100 pages long. And as I understand, it aims at bring forward the important discussion on how to converge technically. So that was mentioned in the previous time I presented all this in another project with Anusha. So yeah, that's probably interesting to you. To be honest, it's fairly complex, and I have difficulty myself understanding everything. That's probably of interest to you in a separate initiative of monitoring. So that's what I thought I would be presenting to you today for the current status of Gaia-X as part of monitoring Gaia-X.